The shout came before the grab. "Hey, step back. Now." Alexis Ward didn't even have time to turn before a hand clamped around her wrist and yanked her backward out of the security line. Her balance broke instantly. The plastic tray she'd just placed her shoes into flipped, clattering across the airport floor. A ripple of gasps ran through the terminal. "What?" Alexis started, steady voice, controlled. "Don't play dumb," the officer snapped. People turned. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" Alexis straightened herself, pulling her arm back instinctively. "You don't need to grab me." I complied. "That's not what I saw," another officer said, already stepping in close, chest puffed, blocking her from the line. "You were acting suspicious." "Suspicious how?" she asked. The first officer laughed, loud and sharp. "You know exactly how." He gestured at her carry-on. "Whose bag is that?" "Mine." "And where are you headed?" "That's on my boarding pass." "Which we haven't verified," the supervisor said, appearing suddenly from behind the scanner. He was taller, older, eyes flat. He glanced at her once, long enough to judge her clothes, her skin, the way she stood, and nodded to the others. "Secondary," he said. "Now, I haven't done anything wrong," Alexis replied. That was when the mood flipped. The supervisor's smile was thin. "You want to make this difficult? I want to know why I'm being pulled out of line." "Lower your voice." "I'm speaking calmly." "Step away from the checkpoint," the first officer barked, tightening his grip again. Alexis felt it then. The shift. The permission. She took one step back to avoid escalating, but another officer came in fast, knocking her shoulder so hard her bag slipped from her grasp and hit the floor. The zipper burst open. Clothes spilled out. A laptop slid across the tiles and stopped inches from someone's shoe. A woman in line gasped. "Oh my God." "Hey," a man shouted. "She didn't do anything." "Everyone back up," the supervisor yelled. "This woman is a security risk." Alexis turned toward him. "You don't get to say that without cause." The supervisor's eyes hardened. "You don't tell me what I get to do." He nodded. "Stop resisting." The shout echoed through the terminal just as two officers grabbed Alexis's arms and shoved her toward the glass wall separating the checkpoint from the seating area. Her shoulder slammed into it. Pain flared sharp and hot. "I'm not resisting," she said clearly. "You're hurting me." "Ma'am, calm down," one officer shouted for the crowd's benefit while wrenching her wrist higher behind her back. Phones were everywhere now. Someone was filming from 10 feet away. Another voice yelled, "This is messed up." The supervisor turned toward the crowd. "Step away." TSA procedures in effect. Alexis's boarding pass fluttered loose from her pocket and skidded across the floor. An officer's boot came down on it casually, grinding it into the tile. "You like first class, huh?" he sneered. "People like you always do." Alexis froze. That line. That assumption. She took a breath. "You need to release me." The officer leaned in close, breath hot near her ear. "Or what?" She didn't answer. That silence pissed him off. He shoved her again, harder, forcing her knees to buckle. Her palms hit the floor to keep herself from going down completely. The humiliation burned hotter than the pain. Around them, the terminal buzzed with tension, shocked murmurs, raised voices, security alarms chirping uselessly in the background. "Get her on the ground," the supervisor ordered. Alexis lifted her head. "If you put me on the ground without cause, you're committing." "Shut up," the first officer snapped. They forced her down anyway. Cold tile against her cheek. A knee pressed between her shoulder blades, pinning her. "Get on the ground," someone shouted again, louder this time, as if volume could rewrite reality. "I am on the ground," Alexis said through clenched teeth. "You're escalating this." A hand yanked her arm back too far. Pain shot up her shoulder. "Don't move," the officer hissed. "Don't you dare move." "I'm not moving." "Stop resisting." The lie rang out clean and practiced. Alexis felt the cuffs snap tight around her wrists. The supervisor crouched in front of her, blocking her view of the crowd. "You should have just cooperated." "I did cooperate." He smiled. "No. You questioned us." She met his eyes. "That's not a crime." "It is today." They hauled her up roughly. Her shoulders screamed in protest. Blood rushed in her ears. Her laptop lay cracked on the floor. Her bag was still open, belongings scattered like evidence in a trial she hadn't agreed to attend. A woman pushed forward. "Are you serious?" "She didn't do anything." The supervisor spun. "Ma'am, step back before you're detained too." The woman froze. Alexis was dragged past the scanners, past the staring faces, past the phones recording every second. She kept her chin up, jaw tight, breathing measured. Inside, everything cataloged itself automatically. Badge numbers glimpsed, accents, reactions, who looked nervous, who looked smug. They shoved her through a door marked authorized personnel only. The door slammed. The noise of the terminal cut off instantly. Inside, the room was smaller, darker. A desk, 2 chairs, a camera mounted in the corner. One officer finally released her arm. Sit. She didn't move. I said sit. Alexis looked at him. Am I being detained or arrested? The officer scoffed. You don't get to ask questions. The supervisor stepped in. Sit. Now. She sat. One officer leaned against the door, arms crossed. Another stood too close, invading space deliberately. The supervisor pulled out a notepad. Name, he said. Alexis Ward. He wrote it down slowly. Occupation. None of your business. He looked up. That's not how this works. You stopped me without cause. Assaulted me. Lied publicly. I'm not volunteering anything beyond what I'm legally required to. The officer by the door laughed. Hear that? She thinks she's a lawyer. The supervisor smiled again. Unlock your phone. No. Excuse me. I do not consent to any searches. The room went quiet. Then the supervisor's smile vanished. You want to make this worse? It's already worse. He nodded once. Take it. An officer lunged forward and snatched her phone from her pocket before she could react. Alexis's hands clenched instinctively, cuffs biting into her skin. You don't have a warrant, she said. We don't need one at an airport. The officer replied smugly. That's not true. He shrugged. Tell it to the judge. Another officer dumped the contents of her bag onto the desk. Clothing, toiletries, documents. He picked up a slim hard case and frowned. What's this? Personal. He shook it lightly. Feels heavy. Put it down. He didn't. The supervisor leaned over. Open it. No. You don't have a choice. Alexis looked him dead in the eye. I absolutely do. The supervisor exhaled sharply, then turned to the others. She's being uncooperative. Mark that. One officer smirked. Already did. Alexis felt it again, that same quiet realization. This wasn't about security. This was about control. About punishing her for not shrinking when they expected her to. Sit back, the officer ordered, pressing a hand to her shoulder. She didn't resist. Didn't give them the satisfaction. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. The air felt stale. The camera in the corner hummed softly. Finally, the supervisor straightened. We're detaining you for further investigation. On what grounds? Disorderly conduct. Interfering with airport operations. That's fabricated. Careful, he warned. Your attitude is being noted. She laughed once, short and humorless. Of course it is. He leaned closer. You have any idea how bad this could go for you? Alexis met his gaze. Do you? Something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second. Then he stood. We're done here. They uncuffed her only to recuff her again with a different set, tighter this time, as if to remind her who they thought held the power. They marched her out through a back corridor, away from the public eye. As they walked, one officer muttered, Could have just kept your mouth shut. Alexis replied calmly, So could you. He stopped abruptly and turned. What did you say? I said nothing you can legally write down. The officer stared at her, jaw tight, then laughed. You're gonna regret today. Maybe, Alexis thought. Or maybe you will. If you're watching this and already feeling that anger rise, don't go anywhere. Stories like this don't end where you think they will. If you want to see how this unfolds, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because what happens next is where everything starts to crack. They pushed her through another door. And somewhere above them, in the terminal she'd been dragged from, the first video clip hit the internet. They shoved Alexis into a narrow holding room barely wider than a hallway. The door slammed shut behind her with a metallic echo that felt intentional, like punctuation. Sit, one of them ordered. Alexis stayed standing. The officer closest to her smirked. You deaf too? I'm listening, she said calmly. I'm also still waiting to be told why I'm being detained. The supervisor stepped forward slowly, clasping his hands like a man enjoying himself. You were disruptive. You interfered with security operations. You refused lawful orders. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened, he replied smoothly. And you're going to calm down before you make this worse. Alexis laughed softly. You already made it worse. The officer by the door pushed off the wall. You want to keep running your mouth, or you want this to go easy? She finally sat, not because she was intimidated, but because she didn't want to give them another excuse. The metal bench was cold through her clothes. One officer pulled out a tablet. Let's start again. Full name. You already have it. Say it. Alexis Ward. Address. No. The officer looked up. Excuse me. I'm not obligated to provide my home address when I haven't been charged with anything. The supervisor sighed dramatically. See? This attitude right here. This is why you people always end up in situations like this. Alexis's eyes snapped up. You people? The room went still. The supervisor smiled thinly. I meant difficult travelers. Interesting, Alexis said. Because that's not what it sounded like. One officer chuckled. You really like to twist things. Another leaned closer, lowering his voice. You should be grateful we're even talking to you like this. Why? Alexis asked. Because you assaulted me in public instead? The officer's smile vanished. Careful. Or what? She asked evenly. You'll lie some more? The supervisor raised a hand. Enough. Search her again. I've already been searched, Alexis said. Do it anyway. An officer stepped forward, hands rough, deliberately invasive. Alexis stiffened but didn't resist. Get your hands off me, she said. Stop tensing up, he replied. You're making this worse. I'm not consenting to this. That doesn't matter here. The search was slow, humiliating. Hands lingered where they didn't need to. One officer whispered, Bet you think you're special. Alexis turned her head. Say that again. He grinned. I said hold still. The supervisor watched the whole thing with bored interest. You got nothing better to do today than miss your flight. Alexis met his eyes. You already made sure of that. He shrugged. Actions have consequences. So does lying, she said. That earned her a sharp shove backward onto the bench. Watch your tone, the officer snapped. Alexis inhaled slowly through her nose. She could feel the room vibrating with their confidence. They believed the story they were writing. They believed no one would challenge it. The supervisor turned to the tablet. Let's document what happened. He read aloud as he typed. Subject became agitated. Refused repeated lawful commands. Displayed aggressive body language. That's false, Alexis said immediately. He didn't look up. Raised voice. Caused public disturbance. I never raised my voice. The officer by the door chimed in. She was yelling. That's a lie, Alexis said. There's footage. The supervisor paused, then smiled. We'll see. He continued typing. Subject resisted physical guidance. Alexis laughed again, louder this time. You slammed me into a wall. See, the officer said. Aggressive. The supervisor nodded, as if proving a point. Threatened officer safety. Alexis leaned forward despite the cuffs biting into her wrists. I never threatened anyone. You don't have to, he replied. Your behavior does it for you. The door opened briefly, and another officer poked his head in. Sir, TSA is asking about the video from the checkpoint. The supervisor's jaw tightened. Tell them it's under review. They're saying passengers are already posting clips online. He turned back to Alexis slowly. That's unfortunate for you. For me? She asked. Or for you? He ignored her. Escort her to processing. They hauled her up again, tighter this time, and walked her down a back corridor lined with gray doors. No windows. No witnesses. As they walked, one officer muttered, You really should have just kept your head down. Alexis replied quietly, So should you. They stopped at a small room with a desk and fingerprint scanner. Sit, the supervisor said again. Alexis sat. Remove the cuffs, he ordered. An officer hesitated. Sir. Do it. The cuffs came off, leaving red marks around her wrists. The supervisor leaned against the desk. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to process you. You're going to be released. And you're going to forget today ever happened. Alexis rubbed her wrists. And if I don't? He smiled. Then you'll find yourself on a no-fly list you can't get off. Maybe flagged for additional screening every time you travel. Maybe worse. That's retaliation. That's security. You're abusing your authority. He shrugged. Prove it. Alexis looked around the room. The scanner. The camera. The officers who wouldn't meet her eyes. You know, she said calmly. This isn't going to end the way you think. The officer laughed. Everyone says that. I don't think everyone means it. The supervisor straightened. Fingerprint her. As her fingers were pressed onto the glass, one officer leaned close and whispered, You should have stayed in your lane. Alexis whispered back. You have no idea what lane you just stepped into. He scoffed. Sure. They finished processing and handed her a stack of papers. Sign, the supervisor said. Alexis scanned them quickly. Fabricated charges. False statements. Omissions so obvious they were insulting. I'm not signing this, she said. The supervisor's smile vanished. Excuse me. I'm not signing a false report. He leaned in close. You don't sign, you sit. Then I sit. The room went silent. The officer by the door shifted nervously. Sir. The supervisor raised a hand. Fine. He gathered the papers. We'll handle it. They escorted her back out, this time toward an exit that led to the parking structure. As they walked, one officer said quietly, You're making a mistake. Alexis looked straight ahead. No, you are. They released her without apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement. Just a warning. The supervisor leaned close one last time. This stays here. If you talk, you'll regret it. Alexis met his eyes. Threats usually sound less desperate. He stepped back sharply. Get out. She walked into the parking garage, the echo of her footsteps loud and steady. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed. A single notification. Then another. Then 10. Videos. Messages. Mentions. The airport chaos was already everywhere. And somewhere behind her, she felt it, the shift. Not in her favor yet, but coming. If you're still watching, you already know this isn't over. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and comment airport if you're ready to see how badly they underestimated her, because what happens next is where they cross the line for good. Alexis didn't drive off immediately. She stood beside her car in the parking garage, breathing slowly, letting the adrenaline drain just enough to think clearly. The echo of engines and rolling suitcases bounced off the concrete walls. Normal life continuing, unaware of what had just happened upstairs. Her phone kept buzzing in her hand. A clip from the terminal. Her being yanked out of line. The shout. The shove. Comments stacking under it faster than she could read. She slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. That was when a shadow passed across her windshield. Alexis looked up. Two figures stood in front of her car. Airport police uniforms. Different officers than before. Her jaw tightened. She lowered the window halfway. Move. One of them leaned forward, resting his palms on the hood. Relax. We just want to talk. Then don't block my car. The second officer glanced around the garage, then smiled. You've been busy. Alexis kept her voice level. You're off duty? Not officially, the first one said. But we heard about your little scene. You mean the assault? He chuckled. Careful how you describe things. Alexis noticed his hand drift near his belt. Not to draw, just enough to remind her it was there. This is harassment, she said. No, the second officer replied. This is advice. About what? He leaned closer to the window. Those videos? They're already being flagged. Taken down. You don't want to fight an airport authority. Alexis tilted her head. Then why are you here? The first officer straightened. Because sometimes people need help understanding consequences. Like being slammed into a wall. His eyes hardened. Watch your mouth. Alexis reached down slowly, deliberately, and placed her phone on the dashboard, screen up. Recording. She didn't announce it. The second officer noticed and laughed. You think that's going to save you? I think you should step away from my vehicle, Alexis said. Or what? The first officer asked. She met his gaze. Or this conversation becomes evidence. He stared at her for a long second, then smiled thinly. You really don't get it. I get it perfectly, she replied. You think because I'm alone, I'll fold. The second officer leaned in closer, lowering his voice. People like you always do. Eventually, Alexis felt the familiar anger flare, sharp and focused. You should choose your words more carefully. Why? He asked. You going to cry about it online? The first officer glanced around again. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to delete whatever you recorded. You're going to stop talking. And this all goes away. And if I don't? He shrugged. Accidents happen in garages like this. The words hung there. Alexis nodded once. You're done. The first officer laughed. See? That's the problem. You think you have authority. I know you don't, she replied. That wiped the smile off his face. Get out of the car, he said. No. He reached for the door handle. Alexis's hand moved first, not to strike, not to escalate, but to lock the doors with a firm click. The sound echoed louder than it should have. The second officer stepped back. Don't make this worse. You already did, Alexis said. She raised her phone slightly, making sure the lens caught both of their faces clearly. Say it again. Say what? What you just threatened. The first officer scoffed. You're bluffing. Am I? Alexis asked calmly. Because you've already said enough. The second officer cursed under his breath. We should go. The first officer hesitated, then straightened. This isn't over. Alexis met his eyes. It is for you. They stepped back slowly, never breaking eye contact, then turned and disappeared between the rows of parked cars. Alexis waited until they were gone before starting the engine. She drove out of the garage without rushing. 3 blocks later, she pulled into a quiet side street and stopped. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't social media. It was a single incoming call. Alexis answered without hesitation. Yes, she said. There was a pause. Then a voice on the other end, low and controlled. Are you safe? For now. Did they release you? Yes. Any injuries? Nothing documented yet. Another pause. Send everything. She didn't ask who else was on the line. She didn't need to. I already am, Alexis replied. She hung up and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The anger was still there, but now it had direction. By the next morning, the story had grown. Headlines argued over what happened. Commentators debated whether Alexis had provoked the officers. Airport officials released a statement praising their team's professionalism while promising an internal review. Alexis watched it all in silence. Then came the knock. She opened her apartment door to find 2 uniformed officers standing there. Her stomach tightened. Yes? She asked. Alexis Ward? One said. Yes. You need to come with us. For what? The second officer shifted uncomfortably. It concerns your mother. The air seemed to drop out of the room. What about her? She's been detained for questioning. On what grounds? Alexis demanded. The first officer avoided her eyes. Administrative matter. Alexis laughed once, sharp and incredulous. You're using my family now? Ma'am, please. No, Alexis snapped. You don't get to please me. She grabbed her keys and stepped into the hallway. Where is she? As they walked, one officer muttered. You should have just let it go. Alexis stopped and turned. You made this personal. He swallowed. We're just doing our jobs. So were the people who threatened me in a garage, she said. How did that turn out? They didn't answer. At the station, Alexis saw her mother sitting on a bench, confused, frightened, hands clasped tight in her lap. That was it. The last line crossed. Alexis walked forward, voice steady but eyes burning. You need to release her. Now. A supervisor stepped out of an office. She's interfering with an investigation. This ends today, Alexis said. He smiled condescendingly. You don't have that power. Alexis took a slow breath. She pulled out her phone. You're about to find out who does. If you're still here, don't blink now. Like the video, subscribe, and comment justice. If you're ready for the moment everything turns. Because what happens next is the reveal they never saw coming. The room went quiet the moment Alexis raised her phone. Not because of the phone itself, but because of how calmly she held it. The supervisor studying her mother glanced at the screen, then back at Alexis. You think calling someone changes this? Alexis didn't raise her voice. She didn't step closer. She didn't threaten. She simply said, You're detaining a civilian with no cause. That's already one violation. The supervisor scoffed. You don't get to lecture us. Release her, Alexis repeated. Her mother looked up at her, confused. Alexis, what's going on? I've got you, Alexis said softly. Just stay right there. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we should check. Enough, the supervisor snapped. She's obstructing. That's all. Alexis nodded slowly, like someone confirming a decision. She tapped her phone once. Daniel, she said clearly. They're refusing. The supervisor's face changed. Who are you talking to? He demanded. Alexis finally met his eyes fully. The FBI. The word hit the room like a dropped tray in a silent airport. One officer laughed nervously. Yeah, okay. Alexis reached into her jacket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a badge. Not flashy, not raised high, just enough. Special Agent Alexis Ward, she said. Joint Terrorism Task Force. Silence. Her mother's eyes widened. Alexis? I'll explain later, Alexis said without looking away from the supervisor. His mouth opened. Closed. That's not funny, he said weakly. Alexis tapped her phone again. Run my badge number. Or wait 30 seconds. The supervisor lunged for the desk phone. He didn't get to it. The door behind them opened. Two men stepped in. Suits. No uniforms. Calm faces. Federal calm. Lieutenant Harris, one of them asked. The supervisor turned, face pale. Who are you? The man held up credentials. Department of Justice. Civil Rights Division. The second man's gaze swept the room, landing on Alexis, then her mother. Agent Ward. Alexis nodded. They detained her without cause. The man turned back to the supervisor. Release her. Now. But. Now. The cuffs came off her mother's wrists so fast they nearly dropped them. Her mother stood shakily, and Alexis was there instantly, steadying her. You're okay. The supervisor tried to recover. There's been a misunderstanding. The DOJ agent raised an eyebrow. There's been a pattern. Alexis finally let herself exhale. Within an hour, the station was swarming. Internal affairs. Airport authority executives. Lawyers who suddenly remembered how phones worked. Alexis sat in a small conference room, hands folded, answering questions calmly while her mother rested beside her, wrapped in a borrowed jacket. A man in a suit cleared his throat. Agent Ward, why didn't you identify yourself earlier? Alexis met his gaze. Because it wouldn't have stopped them. No one argued. Screens played footage pulled from multiple angles. The grab, the shove, the lies shouted to the crowd. Stop resisting. Emails surfaced. Complaints buried. Patterns undeniable. The airport police chief rubbed his temples. This is unacceptable. Alexis nodded. It's routine. That hurt more than yelling ever could. By evening, a press statement went out. Several officers were suspended without pay, pending investigation. Supervisors were removed from active duty. The airport police unit was placed under federal review. No arrests. Just silence. Careers paused mid-sentence. The same officers who'd laughed at her confidence now refused eye contact as their badges were collected. The supervisor who'd threatened her stared straight ahead, while Internal Affairs read his suspension notice aloud. Alexis watched without satisfaction. Only resolve. Outside, reporters shouted questions. Agent Ward, why didn't you fight back? Do you think this was racial profiling? Are you suing? Alexis paused at the door and turned back once. I didn't fight back because this was never about me, she said evenly. It was about proof. She left with her mother, cameras flashing uselessly behind them. Weeks later, the federal report landed. Dozens of complaints validated. Policies rewritten. Oversight imposed. Alexis sat alone in her apartment, reading the final page. Her phone buzzed. A familiar voice on the other end said, "We want you to lead the task force." Alexis closed her eyes briefly. On airport abuse. On systemic abuse, he corrected. She looked at the city outside her window. Thought about the shout. The grab. The lie. I'll do it, she said. But we do it right. After the call, Alexis checked her messages one last time. Thousands. People saying thank you. People sharing stories. People who'd been pulled aside, shoved, silenced. She typed one reply. This is how it changes. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know why it matters. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you're watching from, because stories like this don't get told unless people stay to hear them. And somewhere in an airport, a uniformed officer hesitated before shouting at the next person in line. Because now they knew.